Hi, Peter Charles here of Hooked for Life Fly Fishing, and today we're going to look at rod repair. And I mean this for both fly rods and conventional rods. The technique works for both. It doesn't matter what you're using. I think we've all been in the situation where we've broken our favorite rod, and now we're in a position where we try and go get a new one or warranty or whatever the case may be. And like what happened to me when I was with my previous company, here I am, pro staff, and I couldn't even get a piece for it because it's out of production. It was no longer made. So yeah, I could get a replacement, but it wasn't the same. So I repaired it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I repaired it. Now, there's something that you should be aware of. There's a type of ferrule we rarely see these days in fishing rods. It's called a spigot ferrule. And spigot ferrules join two sections of rods together. And typically today we have what's called tip over butt, where one piece of the rod slides over the other. Well, in spigot ferrule, it's actually like a plug. And a plug puts the two sections of rods together. It's a very efficient ferrule system, but it's also expensive to make. So you don't see it used very often for that reason. So what we're going to do actually is we're going to make a spigot ferrule for our broken rod. So let's look at what I've got here in the way of materials. I got a little piece of wood to cut pieces. I've got my X-Acto knife. I need a marker to mark my position. We need some epoxy glue, and we need some sandpaper. Now, I've got some CA glue here because I want to go fast. I'm going to put the epoxy away, but that's what you actually use when you're doing this for real. This is just for demonstration purposes. Okay, here's our rod that we really, really like. It's been great to us, but it broke. So now we've got to repair it. The first thing you're going to notice is those ends are ragged now. And what I want to do is just take our sandpaper and clean this up. So go grab a cup of coffee or something while I take care of this. Did you get your coffee? As you can see, I cleaned up the ends. So we're going to now get into building our spigot ferrule. Now I've got two other pieces of rods here. Because I was in the business, I've ended up getting a bunch of bits and pieces from customers over the years. So I've got all these leftovers. You may not be in that position. So if you need to get pieces of rods to make the spigot ferrule, you've got a couple of choices. Sometimes you can talk to a fishing store and they'll have some broken rods in the back that you can rummage through and pick up a broken section. The other alternative is actually go to a department store and buy a really, really, really cheap rod and come back home and use that to build your spigot ferrule with. If you've got a fantastic rod that you love, it's probably worth the $30 to buy a cheap rod to use to make the spigot ferrule. So let's start with the construction of the spigot ferrule. What we're going to do is we're going to take the butt end, the thick end, and we're going to take another section and going to push it up and make a spigot ferrule out of it. Now this section, you notice all the guides have been removed. I've also used my sandpaper to remove the finish because we need a place for the glue to adhere. And if we leave the finish on, it may not stick properly. So I'm going to slide this up all the way to the other end so you can see it sticking out now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marker. I'm going to need about 2 to 3 inches. So we're going to be about 2.5 inches. I'm going to mark it. And I'm also going to mark where the middle section is, where it comes out. Okay. So there is our mark, there's our center mark, and there is our end mark. So let's use the X-Acto knife, and what we do is we'll roll it backwards and forwards, apply pressure. And this is scoring the rod. Now it should snap nice and cleanly. There we go. Now, a little bit of cleanup. There's our center section, where our center mark is. Now I've got my thumbnail where I'm going to put another mark. And I'm going to do the same with that. Again, take our sandpaper, clean it up. Now that creates the first part of the spigot, which will fit in the rod like that. And then when I put the other section on, it will be like this. So this is what it will look like when I put it together. Now, I'm going to do one more step. Right in the middle, where that break is going to be a point of high stress. So the spigot could break there when I start to use the rod afterwards. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of my skinny section, and I'm going to slide it in until it stops, and double check it. And as you can see, if I go where my thumb is, you'll see it comes part the way up. So I'm going to cut it off about there. So what's going to happen when I glue these together, that little skinny bit is going to bridge the point of high stress, which is right smack in the middle where the break is. So I'm putting some reinforcing in there. So this is where we begin to use our epoxy, but I'm going to use CA glue just to make things easy on myself. And use the cut-off section to push it in place, nice and tight. Okay, so now this section has right in the middle that short bit that we just glued in place. And so it's thicker in the middle. And I didn't put it right to the end. You notice that short bit ends about here and here on this side. And there's a good reason for that. If I brought it right to the end, it creates a stiff point right there, which will be a point of failure. So by only bringing it part the way up, I'm tapering off the stiffness. So it's very stiff in the middle, somewhat less stiff here, and even less stiff here. So I'm tapering down that stiffness so the rod can still flex through this point. So next step is to insert the spigot into here. So we start with the butt end first. Again, I'm just going to put some CA glue on here. I'm not going to get crazy about putting epoxy. So I'm going to drop that in here, and I'm going to use the butt end of that other piece that I used to make the spigot and poke it into place. The spigot's installed and glued. The last bit is to install our broken section. Now, you'll notice that I have guides on here. When I put this together, I better make sure the guides line up. So, again, pretend this is epoxy. And of course, I'm being sloppy. I'm just going blah, blah, blah. You want to take a little brush and smooth your epoxy out. And now, there we go. Just make sure that's all lined up. Yep. I'm just going to clean that off. All right. There we go. Our assembled rod. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a second video later on, and I'm going to show you how to wrap that section for extra reinforcement. This is a rod building technique. If you've never built a rod before, don't worry. I'll show you how to put together a jury rig that you can use to repair this section with a rod wrap. It finishes it off, it makes it look neat, and it gives a little bit of extra reinforcing. So, stay tuned for the next video.